Canada has been in the news in recent months because somebody decided something that works should be broken, and now we have friction. I find it strange because we have always been global partners and are very similar yet different in a handful of ways. In this video, we're going to compare the difference between the United States and Canada, our good neighbors to the north. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Size versus population. The land of trees and snow versus the lands of crowd and traffic. Canada and the US may be neighbors, but when it comes to space and population, they're playing two completely different games. Canada covers a whopping 9.98 million square kilometers, or about 3.85 million square miles, making it the second largest country in the world just behind Russia. Despite its enormous size, Canada has a relatively tiny population of only about 40 million people. That's 2024. That's about the same as California, but spread across an entire continent worth the land. To put that in perspective, Canada's population density is about 4 people per square kilometer, or about 10 people per square mile. That means for every bustling city like Toronto and Vancouver, there are vast stretches of land where the only inhabitants are trees, lakes, and wildlife, mostly moose, bear, and the occasional lost tourist. A huge reason for this low population density is climate. The further north you go, the less inhabitable things become. Cities like Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver have decent climates. But beyond them, much of the country is rugged wilderness covered by snow for a good chunk of the year. The United States, on the other hand, isn't that much smaller than Canada, covering about 9.83 million square kilometers, or about 3.8 million square miles. So it's only slightly less total land area. But here's the kicker. The US has about 335 million people, nearly 10 times Canada's population. That gives the US a population density of 36 people per square kilometer, about 93 people per square mile, making it far more crowded, especially in the cities. Places like New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago are packed with millions of people, while even smaller cities in the US often have a bigger population than an entire Canadian province. So where do all these Canadians live? Most Canadians, about 90%, live within 100 miles of the US border, or 160 kilometers. Why? Because that's where the climate is somewhat reasonable and most of the country's biggest cities are located. Beyond that, it's mainly tundra, forest, and small towns with names that you've never heard of. In the US, people are spread out all over, but major population centers, including the East Coast with, New York City, Washington, D.C., and Boston. And then you got the West Coast with Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Seattle, and everything in between. There's a solid chunk of the US that's rural, but even small American towns often have more people than some Canadian cities. I live in Portland, Oregon, which is the 27th largest city in the US. That's according to 2024 numbers. If you were to move Portland to Canada, it would be number 10 and 100,000 more people than number 11 on Canada's list. So what's the takeaway? Canada's got a little bit more land, but we got a whole bunch of more people. And the main reason for that? The climate, how cold it is and how wild it is. It's hard to tame really cold land versus, let's say, warm climates. I'm the leader of the free world when it comes to forgotten subscriptions. I watch a lot of movies, I have far too many software subscriptions, which I switch up whenever I find a better service. Just what we do these days. My biggest problem is forgetting to cancel the one I just replaced. I had a recording software for audio that I was paying for 2 years that I haven't used in 2 years. I could have bought a new drone with that kind of money. Because one can never have enough drones. That won't be happening anymore thanks to today's sponsor, Rocket Money. Rocket Money is an easy-to-use app that helps you save more and manage your money better. Just that easy. Besides finding and canceling subscriptions, I love using Rocket Money to lower my bills. Rocket Money will automatically scan your bills to find savings. With just a couple taps, Rocket Money can help negotiate your bills for you, from internet service to cable and phone bills. No need to worry about customer service calls. Let the app's negotiators go to work for you and try and get the best possible rate. This, of course, will help you save money. Rocket Money has helped its customers save up to $740 a year when you use all the app's premium features. So basically, to save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/Briggs or click the link in the description area below to get started for free. Back to the video. Healthcare. Free, sort of, versus expensive, definitely. One of the biggest differences between the US and Canada is the healthcare. In Canada, healthcare is publicly funded, meaning that basic medical services are paid through your taxes. If a Canadian breaks his arm or needs a routine checkup, they can walk into a doctor's office or a hospital and get treated without receiving a surprise bill that costs them more than their rent. In the US, however, healthcare is a completely different beast. Americans either pay for private insurance, rely on employer-sponsored plans, qualify for government programs like Medicare or Medicaid, or if they're unlucky, they go without coverage and hope they don't get sick or injured. So how does Canada's healthcare system work? Canada's system is called Medicare, not to be confused with US Medicare, which only covers seniors. It's a publicly funded system where provinces and territories run their own healthcare programs, but they all follow guidelines set by the federal government. Doctors and hospitals send their bills to the government rather than to the patients. Sounds great, right? Well, it comes with some trade-offs. Wait times, that's their biggest problems. Since everyone has access, demand can be high. Non-urgent procedures like MRIs for a knee injury can involve long wait times, and that's when a lot of Canadians will come across the border and pay for one in the US. They all don't have money or access to get to the US as easily as, let's say, if you make some good money in Canada. I asked a friend a long time ago about this when healthcare was always in the, news and we were always talking about it and complaining about it, and then Obamacare came. But this was brought up during a hockey game. This guy grew up in Detroit and now lives in Toronto. And the way he explained it was this: wait times for things that aren't urgent are there, and they are a pain in the butt. But if you have symptoms of a stroke, you lost your hearing, you've had heart attacks in the past, emergency things like that, there's normally no wait whatsoever other than 20 minutes in the hospital where you got to wait in the waiting room, that type of thing. If you go in with an emergency, they're going to get you right in, just like in the US, to the emergency room. Now, if you need a mole removed, and everyone seems to need a mole removed that week, you might have to wait 2 or 3 weeks. I have Kaiser. I've had United Healthcare, and there were waits with them too. I don't know why everyone acts like there's no waits in the US. I had to get my shoulder worked on 15 years ago in the US. After it was very clear physical therapy wasn't going to fix it, they set me up for surgery. Almost 6 weeks later, I got my surgery. Now, when it comes to other things, they have limited coverage. Now, basic healthcare, doctor's visits, emergency rooms, and hospital stays, it's all covered. But things like prescriptions, dental, vision, and mental health services often aren't unless you have private insurance or a good employer benefits plan. But Canadian prescriptions tend to be a lot cheaper. Now, I've seen different programs and I've seen different studies, but it seems to be on average about 50 to 60% lower than prescriptions in the United States. Dental, vision, and mental health, that's all cheaper in Canada than the United States, but not by much. Now, you also have higher taxes. Canadians pay more in taxes to fund the system, but in exchange, they don't have to worry about medical bankruptcy. But in the US, healthcare systems work like this. The US system is mostly private, which means healthcare operates like a business. People either get insurance through their job, buy insurance themselves, qualify for government programs like Medicare or Medicaid, or go without and risk financial ruin if they need major medical care. Now, I've told this story before. It also does more than ruin your financial life. Sometimes ends your life because you don't want to go to the hospital, get something checked out, and it's something bad happens. Now, that's on the person, and I understand that. But when you got to pay for something that could be terribly expensive, that whole thought in the back of your head, this'll pass, sometimes, takes over. My nephew had a blood clot. He thought he found a way to get rid of it. He read some medical thing and decided to go with it. He didn't make it. Here's the other issue with the US healthcare system. High costs. The US spends more per person on healthcare than any other country, yet many Americans can't afford medical care. Medical bankruptcy. In Canada, an unexpected surgery might be inconvenient. In the US, it could leave you hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and force you to sell your car, your house, and possibly sell your entire collector's edition of Love Boat on VHS. Now, the US does have better access to specialists. While the Canadian system can involve long waits, like we talked about earlier, the US system offers faster access to specialists if you could afford it. So the bottom line is, in Canada, healthcare is free at the point of service, but funded by your taxes, with longer wait times for some procedures. In the US, healthcare is expensive, but faster if you have the money or insurance to pay for it. drinking age, 18, 19 versus 21. One of the biggest culture shocks for young Americans visiting Canada is realizing that their northern neighbors can legally drink at 18 or 19, depending on which province you're in. Meanwhile, in the US, you can vote, you can get married, you could rack up student debt, and even join the military at 18, but buy a beer? Oh, hell no. You gotta wait till you're 21. So you could die for your country at 18, but you can't celebrate getting back from war with a beer for 3 more years. How it works in Canada. The legal drinking age is 18 in Alberta, Quebec, and Manitoba. It's 19 everywhere else, including Ontario and British Columbia. This means if you're an 18-year-old from Michigan, you can take a quick trip to Windsor, Ontario, and legally have a drink, something American college students have been exploiting for decades. How it works in the US. Legal drinking age is 21 in all 50 states. This wasn't always the case. Before 1984, states could set their own drinking age, and many allowed 18-year-olds to drink. Then along came the National Minimum Drinking Age Act, pressuring states to raise it to 21 by threatening to cut off their highway funding if they refused. Spoiler alert, they all caved. Metric versus Imperial. Yes, we go by yards, inches, feet, stuff like that. Canada uses kilometers, Celsius, and liters. We measure things by miles, Fahrenheit, and whatever a cup is. I've been to Canada a few times. Not a lot of people I was with were really up on their metric system. I was lucky enough to have been in the military, and that's how we measure things. At least in distance, kilometers, things like that, meters. It is a bit of a culture shock, but I think less these days versus the old days. I mean, back in the 1970s and 80s, that might as well have been Chinese to Americans. And they talked about switching to the metric system way back then. We never did. I think because Jimmy Carter was in the White House, and I think he was afraid that his entire state that he used to be the governor of wouldn't be able to grasp it. Only 3 countries on the planet use the imperial system: the US, Liberia, Myanmar. Guns. A tale of 2 attitudes. When it comes to guns, the US and Canada are playing entirely different ball games. The US has the Second Amendment, a deeply ingrained gun culture, and more firearms than people. Canada, on the other hand, has stricter gun laws, fewer mass shootings, and generally more reserved attitude towards firearms. But don't be fooled, Canadians do own guns. They just don't talk about them as much. Now, before we get into this, and I know it's gonna spark up some entertainment from the comment section, I own guns. I am a Second Amendment supporter. I just don't think everyone should be able to buy a firearm, or a machine gun for that matter. And I won't discuss it with you, that's not a game I want to play. I have my own views, you have yours, stick with them. So here's the difference. The US, guns are a big deal. The Second Amendment of the Constitution states that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's a big part, shall not be infringed. This has been interpreted over the years as an individual's right to own firearms, making gun ownership a core part of American identity for many. The United States has over 400 million guns in circulation, more than 1 per person. Open carry and concealed carry laws vary by state, but in many places it's not unusual to see someone casually carrying a firearm into a Walmart. Handguns in Canada are heavily restricted, and most semi-automatic weapons are either banned or tightly controlled. So what do we use the guns for in each country? In the US, guns are used for hunting, home defense, shooting sports, and, depending on who you ask, protecting freedom from tyrannical governments. In Canada, guns are mostly used for hunting, sport shooting, and looking cool while trekking through the wilderness. Now you got gun culture versus gun control. In the US, gun culture is a major part of the national identity. Gun rights debates are political flashpoints, and people feel strongly about their right to own firearms. Canada doesn't have the same deep-rooted gun culture. Most people don't feel like they need to own a gun for personal protection, and carrying a firearm in public is not a thing. Gun violence and crime. The US has a significantly higher rate of gun violence and mass shootings compared to Canada. The ease of access to firearms combined with different cultural attitudes play a big role. Canada still has gun-related crimes, don't get me wrong, but mass shootings are much more rare, and gun control laws tend to be stricter after incidents occur. Now, in other countries, they've made stricter gun laws. As a matter of fact, After mass shootings in places like Dunblane in the UK, Port Arthur in Australia, and then again in Nova Scotia, Canada, those countries tightened their gun laws. The US, however, has historically struggled to pass nationwide gun reform after mass shootings. In some US states, you can walk into a gun store, pass a quick background check, and walk out with a firearm the same day. In Canada, you need to take a gun safety course, pass a background check, apply for a license, which can take months, and then you could buy a gun. But not all guns are available to civilians. Guns are a part of life in both countries, but the difference lies how they're viewed and regulated. In the US, it's a constitutional right and a cultural symbol, whereas in Canada, it's a privilege with many restrictions. Hockey versus football. Hockey is life in Canada. In the US, football, the American kind, not soccer, is king. Canadians will tolerate other sports, but if you insult hockey, expect a polite but firm lecture. They're very polite, so it won't be that harsh. I mean, Americans have baseball as their national pastime, but it has definitely lost its luster over the last couple decades. Football is king, and so you compare it to hockey, and we are feverish about it, but nothing like hockey in Canada. Those people get into it, and I mean, it is not lost on the generations or the sexes. You talk to somebody's grandma, and she will tell you all about hockey and what's going on in the league. My friend's mom, when I was in my 20s, used to play hockey with us. She was like 50 at the time. She was all elbows in the corner. Man, that woman was cruel. Now here's some of the more fun stuff. Money. It's colorful versus green. Yes, the Canadian money looks like Monopoly cash, colorful and plastic feeling. US dollars are all the same shade of green, which makes it easy to mix up a $100 bill and a $1 bill if you're really not paying attention. I've been places back in the day when we all used cash, and I'd slap down a 20 thinking I threw down a 10 and then catch it at the last second. And they call their money loonies, because there's a loon, the bird, on their currency. Call it loonies. Accents and pronunciations. Canadians say about like a boot, and they love throwing an A in at the end of almost every sentence. Americans have a ton of regional accents themselves. I mean, from the southern drawl to the Boston pox. Then in California, where every other word is dude. That's not as big a thing as it used to be, but man, when I was a kid, everyone I talked to, because I hung out at the beach mostly, it was dude, dude, dude. Now, besides the accents and all the funny different words they use, we're all using English, except in Canada, they also use French. French is their second language. Canada has two official languages, English and French. In the US, English dominates, but you'll hear plenty of Spanish in certain regions. We just don't have an official language, and that also plays into their accent. George St. Pierre, the UFC fighter, ex-UFC fighter, he's retired now. Listen to that man talk. He sounds like he just came from Paris and trying to speak English. No, he's Canadian. Thanksgiving. Different dates, same food. Canada celebrates Thanksgiving in October, while Americans wait until November. Either way, it's an excuse to eat too much turkey. Now, a lot of the same food is eaten in both countries on this day. But the history of each one's Thanksgiving is a little bit different. Now, Thanksgiving across the country and across the world really have to do with a harvest festival from way back in the day. But in the US, it was brought on. Apparently, the Pilgrims had dinner with the American Indians or the Native Americans. One thing leads to another, and we watch football and eat too much food here in the US. In Canada, they also watch football, but they watch the Canadian Football League, which usually shows 2 games. Just like the US used to, in recent years, we now show like 5 games on Thanksgiving. But in Canada, their history of Thanksgiving comes from a explorer in 1579 who took his fleet looking for Northwest Passage up near Newfoundland. The expedition was plagued by ice and freak storms, which at times scattered the fleet. On meeting again in their anchorage near Baffin Island, they had a religious ceremony and then a little festival. Probably just happy they didn't turn into popsicles. Years later, the French got involved, and it's just kind of evolved since then. There's a lot more that goes into it, and I just don't feel like going through it all. Fast food. Tim Hortons versus everything else. Canada worships Tim Hortons. Coffee and donuts. I've eaten there. Their breakfast was amazing. Both the donuts and this little steak, egg, breakfast sandwich I got. And that's pretty much what Canadians live off of when it comes to fast food. They do have some of the other ones, but not nearly as popular as Tim Hortons. Where in the US, we have every fast food chain imaginable, from McDonald's to Chick-fil-A to Pizza Hut to Wendy's to Five Guys to In-N-Out Burgers. You name it, we got it. And that's a big difference between the United States and Canada. Political temperament. Politeness versus passionate arguments. Canadians are known for their polite, moderate politics. Americans, on the other hand, treat politics like a full contact sport. Our government styles are different. Parliamentary versus presidential. Canada has a prime minister and a system where the party with the most seats gets to lead the country. The US has a president elected separately from Congress, which sometimes leads to political gridlock. Now, they do get passionate about their politics, but not on the level that we do here in the United States, especially in recent years. Politics here in the US has turned into a culture war thing. People get their identity from their politics, in a lot of cases. But it isn't everyone. All over the news, and it's just everywhere to us here in the US, it's actually declining. Gallup did a study. Since 2006, the level of very close attention being paid to national politics had fallen just below 30% of the population. By 2016, that had changed. It had gone all the way up to 39%. It continued to dip till 2019 when it hit its latest low, with only 32% of the people following politics closely, and then it jumped up to 42% in 2020. And in 2024, it had dropped all the way down to 32%. Which I know it seems like politics is everywhere and that's all people talk about. It's actually looking like people are just kind of burnt out on the whole thing. Sort of like back in the 90s and the 80s when we had the daytime talk shows, those over-the-top ones like Geraldo and Jerry Springer and all that stuff. It eventually got to be too much and people just turned away. I think the US is going through that right now myself. I'm not taking a side on political parties. That's up to you. I'm just saying I think the national interest is kind of waning. All right, that's today's video. I hope you liked this little comparison video. It was a little different from what we normally do, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, you'd probably like one of the two videos being suggested right now. Have a great day. Be nice to each other.